You're listening to Musings with Mary. I'm your host, Mary Muse, Muse of many mediums. Each week, I invite my listeners to ask me all their burning questions about the taboo aspects of life. Join me as we explore the human subconscious with open curiosity. Let's uncover how a little creativity can help us unlock our true inner potential. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it.
Sometimes, the work is so, you try to be true. You feel sometimes it's on the verge of a kind of craziness, but it isn't really craziness. It's really getting the truest part of yourself out, and it's very hard. I mean, it's not easy, let's say. And yet it can be very simple at the same time.
Welcome back. I'm so excited to have you here for our first official episode. I thought that for our first episode in this first season of Musings with Mary, it would be best for me to do a little intro to myself in case you have no idea who I am. Because you might be fed this podcast from some algorithm and you might not even know who I am. So I thought it would be good to give a little insight into the new people and also a little insight into some of the people that have been following me for a while that just might not know these things about me. I've shared them on the internet in various places at various times throughout the last 6 years, but we're gonna do a redo, and I'm gonna give you a couple clear insights into the biggest aspects of me and what it is that I do here on the internet. So I'll give you like a little synopsis before I get into some listener questions that'll lead us into the topics we'll be discussing today. But generally, I am Mary Muse. I'm a musician. I'm an adult model. I am a tarot reader, a spiritual witch. I love to read. I love to make art. I love to craft. I love to bake. I'm a cat lady. Those are probably the most important things about me. But today we're going to be talking mainly about my experience as a musician, as a sex worker, and as a witch. So I think that you guys will be excited to hear my insights into those three big aspects of myself. And luckily, I have a few questions that will lead us right down that path. So that brings me to our first listener question. They asked, "At what age did you start playing piano?" I love this question. I get it a lot. And a lot of you that do know me already may know me as the piano lady on TikTok. That's what a lot of people say to me. They're like, "Are you the piano lady?" I'm like, yeah, I guess. There's lots of ladies that play piano, but I've taken on that little title after getting it so many times. You might know me from TikTok. I, for the last year and a half, have been playing live piano on TikTok in my sexy little cocktail dresses. It's been a blast. It brought a majority of my audience to me. So people are always asking me questions about when I started and how long I've been playing. So I started when I was 4 years old. I have three older siblings that all played piano, so I sat and listened to them as I was a child. And by the time I could reach the keys, I was reaching for them. So I was just playing by ear, making my little tunes. And my mom decided the year after, when I was 5, to get me some lessons. So I took lessons all the way through high school, and then I ended up majoring in music. I have a degree in music education. I worked as a music teacher for quite a while, but that's a whole other thing, so we won't get into that for right now. If you want to know more about that, I did guest star on an episode of When We're Not Hustling, and the host, Jesse, and I talked a little bit about being teachers, so that's a lovely episode if you'd like to listen to that. You can check that out through my little link site. But anyway, yeah, so I went on to major in music because I loved it so much. Piano, I always joke that piano was my first love, but it's very true. I was just always drawn to playing the piano, and I always had a knack for it, but I also, spent a lot of time studying it and practicing and honing my skills. So, yeah, it's been a while. If I had to count how many years I've been playing. How old am I? I think that would bring it to 28 years. 28 years I've been playing the piano. So when I got to the point where I had to decide what I wanted to do for a degree, I was either going to become an art teacher or a music teacher, and I ended up picking music. So I'm kind of in my rediscovering of my art at the moment right now. That's again another topic. We'll stay on topic so we can get into our second question, which is a perfect little segue. They asked, I'd like to learn about your experiences whilst being a music student. So I really enjoyed my time in college. I am a big teacher's pet. I think that teachers' pets make good teachers. At one point in my life, I really wanted to be a professional student. I wanted to continue on and get a master's and a doctorate degree. Didn't end up doing that, but maybe someday I will, if they make college free. But yeah, I really enjoyed my time. I was a super overachiever. When you're a piano major, you get pulled in a lot of different directions. If you are a pianist and you're listening to this, you probably know what I'm talking about. But when you're a pianist, a lot of people want you to accompany them. Accompanying, that word means that a one musician is playing the background sounds to a main instrument or a vocalist, right? So pianists commonly end up as accompanists, and I did that for work for a while actually after college, but I had a lot of experience doing it in college as well and was definitely spread very thin. Um, I played for the concert choirs and for our wind ensemble at some points. I did a few concerto competitions while I was in college, and I did those all throughout my um, middle school, maybe even elementary school, middle school through high school as well. Lots of piano competitions, lots of memorizing really long pieces. That's why you can't catch me memorizing any music anymore. Although it would probably would be good for me. But anyway, I really did thrive, even though I was definitely spread thin in college. I really thrived there. I was like the president of a bunch of different music organizations that we had. And I really loved it. I mean, I thrived, but I also was, like, at my wit's end all the time. I loved it at the time. My teacher in college, my piano teacher, was of the mindset that even though a lot of her piano majors were music education majors. She was going to treat us like we were performance majors. So she expected a lot of us and she held us to really high standards. And I do owe a lot of my abilities to her. I essentially had to completely change my physical technique whenever I first started with her. She really kind of rocked my world when it came to that. I came in and she was like, "Why are you playing like that? You have to play like this." I was like, "Oh, oh no." So it was painstaking, but it was very, very I mean, it changed my life. It changed my abilities in so many ways, and without her, I don't think I would have been able to be a professional musician. Um, so I do owe a lot of thanks to her. She was very tough, though, and she definitely left her scars on me, so I think a lot of music majors probably have an experience like that with a music teacher or 2, but overall, I had a really good experience there. I did experience my first wrist injury while I was in college. And if you know me and you've known me through TikTok, you might know that I had a wrist surgery back in 2021. That was a separate injury that I had almost 10 years later after college. But I've always had wrist problems throughout my 20s. I experienced a lot of wrist problems, which was definitely stressful for a music major. But that's a really long other story, and I'm sure I will actually talk about it at some point because I definitely want to talk about chronic pain on this podcast because I don't think enough people talk about it. It's really hard to talk about, and being that I am removed a few years out of that experience, I feel a need to share about it at some point because it's it's really hard to go through that, and there are people that have chronic pain that will never heal. And my heart goes out to you, and I think it's just important for us to talk about those kinds of things. But anyway, if I talked about everything I want to talk about in this one episode, it would be 300 hours long. So I'll stop myself there. Our third question draws us into our next topic. This listener asked, What drew you to sex work? Was it different aspects of your life or more of a curiosity turned passion? The answer for this one is both. I think, first of all, I grew up in a very repressed area, very conservative, very white Christian, and not necessarily, it didn't necessarily come from my home as much as it did from the community. Um, we were raised Christian in my house, but my parents weren't super strict, but they did come from generations and generations of Christian upbringing, you know? So that idea of like save yourself till marriage and sex is bad, sex is the devil, was definitely like an undertow in the sea of like, big talks that we got. I actually didn't even get a sex talk until my parents caught me with my first boyfriend. Um, they didn't catch us in the act or anything, but, he brought me to the door and his shirt was untucked. Back in the day whenever we were, like, teens and didn't have anywhere to go, so we made out in his car. We saw his shirt untucked, and then they took me aside after he left and were like, "Hey, so you're, like, using protection, right?" And I was like, "Oh my god, we're not having sex, ah," and they, like, freaked out. We weren't actually having sex, so it was a good thing they caught me then, but I actually didn't really even need to have that talk because I was so terrified of sex because of the education that I had gotten around it and like the way that I had just been taught that sex was this taboo thing that women didn't enjoy. Really put a number on me. It really did. And the thing is that I was very interested in sex for a long time. And it was this like secret part of myself. Like I was masturbating and none of my friends were, or at least none of them were admitting to, none of the women in my friend groups were admitting to actually masturbating. And it made me feel so much shame for so long. And this is even beside my like realization that I was bisexual. That didn't come for me until I was like 21 years old. And the reason that it came to me then was because my partner, who's I'm still with now, was like, "Hey, don't you think that like you might be a little gay?" I was like, "Oh, I guess you're right." I kinda looked back and realized, like, all the times that I, was attracted to people outside of the gender binary, I like to call myself pansexual because of that, because I'm attracted to people on both sides of the spectrum, like, like, super masculine and super feminine, but I'm also very attracted to people in the middle somewhere. So, that's been a part of me for a really long time, but I repressed it for a very long time, and I've been in a straight passing relationship since then. So that part of my sexuality is something that's very like private and I keep it to myself because I fear I fear looking like a queer baiter. I yeah, so that's a complicated part of my sexuality, but to get back to the actual point of the question, what drew you to sex work? Was it aspects of your life? I think that repression definitely like grew this fascination within me that was very secretive for a long time, but for a long time, I definitely thought like I had little thoughts about what would happen? What would happen if I got into porn? Could I do this? Like, I think I would be good at this. And I had these thoughts for a very long time. By the time I got into my 20s, I had kind of accepted that, like, I'm not going to do that. There's no way. Like, there's no way I can go against like all these norms that I've been taught and do this crazy thing. It was just like a pipe dream for me, right? Um, but when I turned 26, 27, I hit a point in my life where I knew that something had to give. And I did actually reach a pretty low point. And it was at that time that I was like, fuck it, let's go. And I started doing sex work on the side with like three other jobs at the time. And eventually, within a year, it grew into something that became full time. And since then, I've been supporting myself full time off of sex work. It was really the invention of OnlyFans and subscription models that opened my mind to it because I saw different people in my friend group starting OnlyFans, and I was like, wow, like that's something I could really get into because getting into mainstream porn has never been something that I really wanted to do. I really am mostly a solo performer. I record with my partner sometimes, but I'm most comfortable by myself, like by myself in my office with my camera. I'm good. I'm not confident enough. I'm definitely not confident enough or open enough to be a professional porn performer. So when OnlyFans came around, I was like, oh, this puts this in my hands. Like, I am into this. And so the rest is history. And I'm very glad that I decided to do it. It definitely has created problems in my life, but it's also changed my life astronomically for the better. So I'm very grateful for it. And I'm very passionate about sex workers' rights. I think that sex work should be decriminalized, it should be destigmatized, and it's been around forever. It's going to be around forever. And there shouldn't be any shame in it. But obviously, I understand as a person that has a lot of shame around my sexuality due to the way that my environment was growing up. I understand it's going to be a long process to destigmatize sex work, but I'm here for it. This is why I want to talk about these kinds of things because a lot of people have a lot of preconceived notions, and sex is not the enemy. So that's my answer to your question. It was a curiosity turned passion, and it is certainly my passion now. I love what I do. I have so much fun doing it, and it's a huge blessing in my life. So I hope that answered your question. I did actually record a whole episode about my sex work journey in tandem with my spiritual journey in my first season of my first podcast, Sex Work for the Soul. And if you want to hear more about that, because those two things went very, very, very hand in hand. And if you'd like to hear about that connection, you can listen to all of those episodes of Sex Work for the Soul over on my Patreon for free. You can follow my Patreon for free to listen to every single one of those episodes. There are 8 already uploaded there, and you can get a little insight into how sex work and spirituality really combined for me as I began on my little sex work journey. Our next question is semi-related, but it's also about sex work. They asked, "What was the biggest fear that you had at the beginning of doing sex work?" Top tier page, by the way. Thank you. I really appreciate that. This is a good question. I know a lot of people wonder about this, and I think that my answer is probably going to be pretty, um, like you're probably going to know what I'm going to say, right? But I think this is a fear for most sex workers. I definitely have a fear of getting a stalker. I luckily have not had that experience in 6 years of doing sex work. I'm also very, very, very protective of my private information. So, that is why that has not happened to me. I am knocking on wood right now, because this is like a very real fear for a lot of sex workers, and it's also a very real reality for a lot of sex workers. I've had a lot of friends over the years that have had people discover them in person and abuse them in various ways. Not to get dark on us, but this is the reality of sex work. It is not a safe industry, and legally, sex workers are not given protections. When sex workers go to the police, there's a high likeliness that they will be charged in some kind of way or just not helped at all, even if you're doing a legal form of sex work, which is what I do. So it's that's definitely the fear for sure, biggest one. But I don't struggle with it as much now. I definitely think that was what held me back from becoming a sex worker for a long time, was that fear. It's just honestly, it's a fear of men. Ooh, is that sad to say? But it's the truth. My biggest fear is men. My biggest fear in this industry is violent men that can't take no for an answer and like to push past people's boundaries and feel entitled to people's personal space. So yeah, that's a deep dark answer, but it's a deep dark question. So hopefully that answered it for you. The next question is kind of funny to go into after this, but I had to include it because so many people ask me this, and I know that so many people want the answer to this. I've already talked about my partner in this episode, so this shouldn't come as a surprise. But this person asked, "Are you single?" And no, I'm not. I haven't been single for a really long time. I haven't been on the market for a really long time. Uh, we're coming up on our 14th year anniversary this January. So we've been together for a very long time. I get a lot of questions from people about like how has sex work uh, affected your dating prospects or like your experience in dating. And it's funny because I'm like, oh, I have no idea. I have not had to date when, like, while being a sex worker. I'm so far removed from dating culture that I have no idea. I'm sure that it does make things difficult for people that are single and doing sex work. But yeah, I don't have that experience since I've been taken for a long time. But yeah, I am in a committed monogamous relationship. He was like one of my biggest supporters when I first started doing sex work. I had to kind of pull back from a lot of family members in order to keep it a secret for a while. I did come out to my family members in the last couple of years and it went pretty well. It went as well as it could have gone. Um, but I needed that space from a lot of our family for a long time. And he was kind of my only support during those times. So I have so much to thank him for. He's been my rock through a lot of really difficult times, including my surgeries and the injury that I had before I got the surgery. So, yeah, I have a really loving and very supportive partner. We've both grown a ton with each other over these last 14 years. It's crazy. Like we're getting to a point where we're like, "Oh my god, what is time?" Like that was a whole lifetime ago that that happened. So, I can't wait to, like, be 40 years down the line and be like, "Oh my god, remember TikTok?" He's been such a huge supporter for me with the TikTok era as well, actually. If you know me through the TikTok live streams and my Twitch live streams as well, you'll know that my partner is my one moderator, and he's been in the comments protecting me from the misogyny of random people on the internet for the last few years, and yeah, I'm so grateful for him and his support because I couldn't have done it without him. So yeah, that's my answer to that question. So sorry, I'm not single, but you can still enjoy my OnlyFans. I don't have to be single for you to enjoy that. Our next question brings us into the realm of spirituality. Someone on Instagram asked, "When did you realize you were a witch? How long have you been practicing?" And I love this question. It feels so cute. It makes me picture that, like, people think that, like, I got a Hogwarts letter or something. It wasn't quite like that. Like, there was not a moment where I was like, "I'm a witch. Mary, you're a witch." Um, no, that didn't really happen for me because I actually lived my life as an atheist for a really long time. I grew up Christian, lost my faith when I was around 12, became an atheist for a very long time, did not tell anybody because I was way, way, way terrified to say that because it was, like, so taboo to say you didn't believe in God in my town. So I didn't even talk about being an atheist until I got to college, and, at that point, I actually started getting into Buddhism. Was always really fascinated by a lot of different Eastern styles of spirituality and religion, including like chakras and energy work. My mom is a Reiki healer. So I've been exposed to like various forms of spirituality from a young age, and like shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender got me really interested in energy. It's actually what my tattoo is. People ask me a lot what my tattoo on the back of my arm represents, and it's the alchemical symbols for the elements. It's partly in homage to Avatar: The Last Airbender because of the elements aspect, and, also it's a callback to one of my favorite animes, Full Metal Alchemist. But anyway, I did not realize I was a witch right away. It took a long process of being introduced to tarot first, through a Reiki healer that I went to during a really tough time in my life. Um, and it took about 6 months for me to even consider that that tarot reading had any weight to it. I thought it was bullshit. I've talked about this a lot before, mostly on my last podcast on sex work for the soul. So if you want to listen to that again, it's available for free over on my Patreon, and you can listen to all the all the ways that I found myself, slipping into spirituality. But yeah, it took a lot of time. Tarot was definitely my gateway drug into spirituality. And then I started doing a lot of somatic work with different teachers, which is basically like the practice of um, uh, expressing energy through your body. Um, and that was really healing for me because as a person, I think I've said this in this podcast. as a person that has always had anxiety and depression, I have something called PMDD, which stands for premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Um, and I really have struggled with my mental health a lot. I've gone to therapy for a long time. Since I was 17, I started therapy, and I've been to lots of different therapists. And therapy is very helpful for me. But it's also, I can't just rely on therapy for my mental health. And I think this is a truth for a lot of people. Therapy does like a little bit of the work, but a lot of the work that we have to do, a lot of us, I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak from my own experience. I am very intellectual about my feelings. I can root into the causes of, and the motivations of my actions and feelings and beliefs. And that's like very second nature to me. It's super easy to do that. I intellectualize all of my feelings automatically. And I'm going to blame that on my Aquarius moon. But, it's just what I've always done. And my actual, you know, my experience with spirituality kinda started with realizing that I actually need something that will help me feel my feelings instead of think about my feelings because I'm great at thinking about them, but I'm not so great at feeling them. So doing those somatic practices, I did some tantra work, I did some ecstatic dancing, with different teachers, and those things really led me into the arena of energy working, which led me down lots of different paths. But at one point, I wanted to become Reiki certified. I still think that I would like to do that. I would love to get breathwork certified as well because yoga and breathwork have been very, very helpful for me as well. I'm definitely I think it's important to mention this. Yoga is not just for your physical health. Yoga in its ancient form is very all-encompassing. It's a spiritual practice, it's a lifestyle. It is much more than just poses that you do on a mat. And I was lucky to have a yoga teacher way before I ever took on um, the label of witch. The yoga teacher, who is most likely a witch, was was doing solstice, you know, solstice flows and moon salutations, and she was leading us through meditations using different ohms and like all these really powerful somatic practices from like traditional yoga, and it was really beautiful and yeah, so that was a big part of me accepting spirituality as an aspect of my life as well, and that happened before any of the tarot stuff came through. So I've been on this like intentional journey of kind of building my spiritual toolbox for a long time. And by the time I got into tarot, I started working with my intuition, and working with my intuition really got me into witchcraft. The tarot readers that I started listening to were also astrologers, and so I got really into astrology. I started working alongside my astrology mentor, Danny, from That Witch Next Door, and now I serve as her headmistress of tarot in her witch school, so that's fun. But she taught me everything I know about astrology, and astrology really gave me such a beautiful lens to do my inner work through. So instead of just, intellectualizing my feelings, I'm looking at my placements in my charts and seeing how does this manifest in my life and how can I work with these energies in order to create more growth. So it's been a wonderful, really helpful, um, really, really helpful tool for healing for me. And for those of you that don't believe in, any of these spiritual practices, I invite you to stay open about it because I didn't believe in any of this shit 6 years ago. And I'm not trying to pipeline you, but but I do want you to stay open-minded because the reason that I believe in these things is because of, like, hardcore evidence that I've experienced in my life, firsthand experiences that have led me down this path and not just what other people have promised me or what they've told me I should believe. It's really been firsthand experiences of different correspondences that happened in my life that really aligned into leading me down a path towards witchcraft and spirituality. So it was not like I haven't been duped. The charlatans didn't get me. He didn't trick me into being, scammed or whatever. It was a really, really super life-changing path that I went down that just got deeper and deeper. And it's certainly a journey. So there are times where I'm very connected to my spirituality and I'm doing witchcraft all over the place. And then there are times where I'm very disconnected from my spirituality. And honestly, over the last year, it's been one of those very disconnected times. So one of my big goals for this year is to reconnect to my witchcraft and to hopefully share more about it. Honestly, it's been hard for me to share about because it is such a sacred thing for me, especially because it was so hard for me to foster this faith in this unseen force, right? I don't really believe in God necessarily, but I do believe in the universe. I do think that we're all connected and that energy is at the core of everything. And I mean, that's like a scientific fact, right? So, my belief in spirituality is very scientifically tied. Like, the that's what I love about witchcraft is that, like, it does not have to be separated from science. And a lot of people think that, like, we think that magic practitioners believe in, like, movie magic, and we don't, guys. Um, can't speak for everybody, but that's not what magic is. It is it goes so much deeper than that. And it's not this, like it's not movie magic, I'll just say that. That's another topic for another day, but I have been practicing since I started doing sex work, so my witchcraft experience and journey, whatever you wanna call it, has, really coincided with my sex work journey, and I used a lot of witchcraft practices and energy work to unlock a lot of my own sensuality and acceptance that I am a sexual being and that's okay. I worked really, really hard to release a lot of shame through a lot of different somatic exercises, and it has been astronomically helpful for me. So, if you want to hear more about that, again, check out Sex Work for the Soul over on my Patreon for free. Our last question is, what makes you happy in terms of content creation? And this is a tricky one for me to answer because if you know me, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I just posted on my Instagram a couple weeks ago about taking a break from live streaming. A lot of you probably know me through live streaming, like I've said. Um, and that was like my bread and butter for the last almost 2 years. But I've recognized that it's kind of holding me back from a lot of the different things that I want to accomplish that I set for myself, goals that I set for myself years ago. So I'm really in this reframing of what do I want to create right now? And I'm not sure when I'll figure it all out. I'm leaving it open for myself. I'm going to allow this next month to be a time for focusing on this podcast and the meditations that I want to make for the Patreon. I did make a fun little Yule meditation last week. In case you haven't listened to it, if you're listening here on January 1st, um, it's really what I want to focus on. I want to write more. I have goals to write romance novels someday. Like, I really want to put my energy into fostering these different projects that I've really wanted to put energy into for the last few years that I just didn't have the energy for whenever I was live streaming. So, I to ask me what makes me happy in terms of content creation, it makes me happy when I'm able to let go of perfectionism, which is a huge thing that holds me back. It's the biggest reason why this podcast was on hiatus for a year and a half, um, because I really suffer from perfectionism, and it's much easier for me to control that, with my photos and videos that I make, like, for my OnlyFans. I've got that down to a T. But for these kinds of things where I'm sharing more personal stuff, um, it's really hard for me to not want to make it absolutely perfect. So I'm trying I'll be honest, this is my second time recording this episode. I'm really gonna try my best to not go back and listen and cut out everything and, you know, just perfectionize the hell out of this episode. So it makes me most happiest, that's not my God, look at me doing it in real time. It makes me happiest when I'm able to let go of perfectionism and just create. That is my goal for this next year, is allowing myself to not be perfect and just stuff. Make stuff that makes me happy. So, hopefully, in this next year, it'll be more podcast episodes, more guided meditations because I really, really enjoy writing those. I love making fantasy inspired guided meditations. I think it's a really lovely way to just sit and have some me time, honestly. Even if you're not spiritual, it can be a really great way to get into meditation is having someone kind of lead you through a journey and lead you through some breath work. And that's my goal for that. So I definitely want to focus on that. I would love to write more. I'd love to write more creative, romance erotica. And I'd love to write some essays about all these different kinds of things that I'm talking to you guys about today. I would love to focus more energy on making content for my OnlyFans and Fansly again, because I used to really spend a lot more energy on that stuff. And when I started doing live streaming, that took a lot of my time and energy away from me. So I would love to find another way to share my music with you guys. And so far, right now, I think I'm probably going to record some audio only piano for my Patreon so you guys can listen anytime you want. I might also put that over on YouTube. But yeah, we'll see. I'm really exploring how I want to do that and how I can kind of reclaim my music for myself first before I start sharing it again with you guys. I have a feeling I'm going to come back to live streaming. I don't know what it's going to look like. It will be different than it was before, but I'm really on a very intentional journey of learning what does make me happy and what do I want to share with people? Why do I want to share with people and what do I want to accomplish by sharing the content that I'm making? So, I'm asking myself a lot of deep questions now. And your question is like a really good self-reflection question for me at this time, actually. So thank you for asking. Thank you to all the people that sent in questions. I have a lot more queued up, but I'm also going to be asking for more questions every single Wednesday over on my Instagram. If you don't follow me already, it's Making Mary XOXO. You can find all my links in the description of this podcast episode. I really, really appreciate you guys listening. I hope that it was interesting. I go on some tangents here and there, so hopefully they were entertaining to listen to. Thank you so much for allowing me to sit in your earbuds today. I'm very excited for more episodes to come, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for giving me your time, and I'll see you in the next one. You can visit marymusexoxo.com to find all of Mary's links. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on all your favorite listening platforms. And if you feel inclined, leave a 5-star review for us. Thanks for listening.